So I have this picture, this skull, sort of a cartoon skull, and I'm going to go about drawing it just sort of over here, sort of the same size that it is. So when I'm looking at something and I want to draw it, I'm going to do the things we already talked about, drawing lightly, okay, thinking about basic shapes first, okay? I'm going to hold my pencil a little bit further away. I'm going to be a little more loose at the beginning. I'm going to draw the really basic stuff first and then the really detailed stuff at the end, okay? So when I look at this picture, I chose this skull because it's really clear the shapes that it's made up of. Okay, I've got this sort of oval here. I've got this almost square here. There's sort of a rectangle here and sort of another little square here. Okay, so when I'm drawing this, I'm going to just think about how these shapes interact with one another, the sizes of them, and how I can put them all in the right spot. Okay, so when I'm going to start with the biggest shapes first. I'm always going to do my biggest shapes first. So I have this shape. It sort of looks like this. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's sort of right there. Okay, now when I'm looking at my next shape, I'm going to draw this sort of square here. I'm going to kind of look at how far this comes into this first shape that I made, right? So if I look at this first shape, I know that I don't want to go past right there. Okay, and I'm going to try to get this angle correct too. So I'm going to start to go like that. It's going to come down here. This part's going to come out almost to the front of this, right? So that's going to come out sort of like that. And then I'm not going to connect it because that doesn't really connect. Okay, I think I have this angle a little bit wrong too, so I'm going to draw that a little lower. And then that'll kind of be like that. Okay, when I'm drawing this next large shape, this rectangle, it's sort of at an angle, and it's a little bit lower, about right there. Okay, so I'm going to draw about that. This end of it doesn't quite go out that far, so I'm going to think about it coming to about right here. And it sticks out from the front of that original shape. Okay, then all I have to do is think about this last shape here. A little further. Then there's going to be a little bit of a space right here. So that's going to sort of look like that. This line, I think, actually needs to come back a little bit more. Okay, so once I have those pretty much drawn in, you can see how that's really starting to look like that skull, right? And I haven't really drawn a skull yet. If you didn't have this picture here, you might not necessarily know that that was a skull, right? So now that I have all my pieces there, I need to know if they're actually in the right spot. Okay, so before I start drawing anything more, I need to really look and make sure that I have enough space where I need it. Okay, so as I'm looking at this, I'm sort of seeing that this might stick out a little bit too far. I'm actually going to bring this in a little bit. Okay. I'm seeing that I probably need to add a little bit more height on this first shape. So I'm going to give this a little bit bigger, or maybe a little bit further in the back, and then kind of flattens off back here. And then it comes down and rounds off again. Okay, so as I'm doing this, remember you fix it first and then erase it second, so you don't just end up putting that line in the same spot where you know it's not supposed to go. It's actually going to go a little bit in. So this is what I'm doing right now is really, really, really the most important part, because if you draw all these pieces and one of them is way in the wrong spot or way the wrong size, and you end up doing all the detail, then you're going to have to go back and erase all that good detail that you've drawn to get it in the right spot. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. I think this line maybe needs to come out a little bit further. A little more of an angle too. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. So now what I can do is I can start to think about the smaller shapes, right? Maybe the eyes, the nose. I can start thinking about the curves on these things instead of just these corners. So as I start adding detail, I'm going to look. This kind of has a curve and then another curve. So as I start to work more specific, do you guys see how I'm drawing a little bit darker? This is going to help me know which lines I'm going to keep and which lines are going to be erased in a little bit. Okay, I can start to put in these other, well, I guess I want to get this in the right spot first before I make sure. I want to get those eyes right where they're supposed to be. Okay, so this eye is going to fit right in here. It's kind of this shape. I'll change it a little more exact. This eye is significantly smaller than that eye, so I'm going to draw it up here. Went a little bit too far out with that one. I made it a little too big. Okay, this nose comes right here. The top of the nose is just a little bit higher than that where these two lines come together. And then before I draw all these teeth, I'm just going to kind of draw this line. And then I will draw the tops of the teeth too, so that I make sure that I draw them all roughly the same height. Okay, and that tooth ends right about there. There's going to be this other jaw, bottom side of the jaw that comes out under here. This part comes around like this. And then this goes right there. So now I'm looking, as I drew these in here, I need this to be a little skinnier. I'm seeing that this line is a little bit too far away. See how the gap is smaller over here? So before I make all these little details, I'm going to get everything the right size. Okay. So keep in mind, I draw every day, all day, pretty much here at school, and I'm still making mistakes and I'm fixing them as I go. I'm not getting upset about the mistakes. I'm not crumpling up the paper and starting over, right? It's all about just fixing them. Okay, so when I draw these teeth, I want to make sure I have the right number of teeth because I'm drawing something specifically, right? So some of you have, like, I know there's a couple SpongeBobs being drawn. When you're doing a SpongeBob, you want to make sure that you have the right number of the little spots on him for the sponge, right? You want to make sure that you have the right number of sort of squiggles going up the side of his body. You're really trying to count and make sure that you're getting things pretty exact. Like I ended up, yeah, one tooth short there. Can make those a little skinnier. Okay. So I'm drawing these light because I know that this curve is going to be a little bit difficult on these teeth. Okay, what else do I need? Start drawing in all these shapes and all that extra stuff, right? So the main thing that I really want you guys to sort of take away from this is that basic sort of building up of shapes at the beginning and how important it is to get that pretty correct right off the bat, or else everything's going to be just a little bit off and you're going to notice how weird it looks as you're working, okay? So you want to really build up those shapes and get them in the right spot, in the right size, in the right place before you do anything super specific, right? I still haven't done all the really specific stuff on this skull. Okay, and I would go around, I'd make the outline thicker, I would draw all these little marks. I would shade it, right? There's white and then a light gray and a little darker gray and then black. All right, so I would do all those things, put all these little parts in the middle. And as I kept working here, it would get more and more and more to look just like that. Okay? So I went ahead and finished this drawing. This is actually a different one than I did before. I did this as an example for my next class after the original one. And I just went ahead and finished it, and I shaded it. And this one, I made a couple little adjustments just with proportion and things, getting the angles a little better. And so this is sort of like a second draft. And this one really turned out pretty close, I think. And I really like how it turned out. So as you guys are working on your drawings, really shoot for getting, the shapes to all sort of correlate to each other, to get your angles correct, and really to be looking at really those big basic shapes first. As long as you can map out those big basic shapes and get those in the right place first, you're really going to set yourself up for a pretty successful drawing. I think if those aren't in the right spot, or they're not the right shape, or they're not the right angle, then everything you're going to do after that is going to be just a little bit off. So make sure you're really paying attention to how, all these shapes, how they relate to one another, how proportions work, and how you can get, if this shape is big, then the rest of the shapes need to match that first shape. So really pay really close attention to that.